Hi everyone, this is Luke once again, and today I'd like to start a new segment on ThursDev here, where I analytically break down one significant game-defining mechanic from a popular or well-known game, and detail how it works, its perceived motivation, and my thoughts on its impact on the game it hails from. Where relevant, I also plan to draw contrasts with other similar games' implementation thereof, or lack of similar mechanics, and how it helps to differentiate. This is really the first in a series of thought experiments after a fashion. By no means do I have access to the design documents behind these mechanics, but the best game designs are always the ones that are transparent enough that, with testing, the players should be able to figure out intuitively. The goal of this exercise is to look at how a single game mechanic is created, balanced, and presented within a game, and to outline the elegance of such mechanics. Since we're on something of an Overwatch kick, in case you hadn't noticed, I'd like to start with something fairly fresh in my mind, the ultimate ability in Overwatch, the power that you execute with the Q key, at least on PC, that when executed deftly can potentially completely turn the tide of battle. Because of this, it's fairly safe to say that outside of all of the standard game mechanics at play, this one is particularly significant as it serves as a milestone in the player's personal combat experience. To begin our analysis, let's start with a simple overview of the mechanic. During combat, as a player continues their battle, they're able to accumulate points toward filling an ultimate meter, which is a prominently displayed UI element. Under most circumstances, the meter is filled via dealing damage, but also has a slow but constant rate of growth even outside of combat engagement, to the tune of about 1% every 2.5 to about 4 seconds, depending on the character. The main exceptions to this rule of damage to ultimate gauge conversion are Mercy, whose gauge fills in proportion to health restored on teammates with her staff, and through damage done by Turbulence turrets, mitigating the innate lack of ability of the characters to do significant amounts of damage on their own. Once the meter has been filled, the character is granted one use of their ultimate ability, which they can execute at any time that is unique to each character, but typically either deals large amounts of damage to groups of enemies, hampers their movement, or gives the team a competitive advantage in the form of defense, healing, or additional utility. The gauge is persistent across lives, so the player can die without losing their ultimate gauge's progress, but it resets to 0 when a player switches to a different character. Until an ability is triggered, the gauge remains at 100%, and it's expended and returns to 0 when the ability is used. The abilities are extremely powerful, but many also have weaknesses that can be exploited by the opposing team. As each individual character's abilities are unique and not specifically consequential to this video, I won't be going over each one of them, but instead I'll focus on a few representative samples. One of the most easy to recognize and quantify damaging abilities is Hanzo's Dragon Strike. When his ultimate is fully charged, executing his ultimate ability fires an arrow that travels for a short distance before spawning a pair of spirit dragons that travel in a straight line through walls and obstructions, dealing upward of 200 damage a second to any enemy caught within its damage cylinder. The dragon's mesh is very large and clearly defines the cylinder, and moves reasonably slowly, so the opposing team, if vigilant, should be able to move out of its way. Similarly, Pharah is equipped with the Rocket Barrage, which fires a salvo of 90 rockets over 5 seconds from a fixed position that do 40 damage in a small area of effect each. The ability can be devastating, but she's vulnerable while the ability's in effect, and she's unable to move during those 5 seconds and can easily be killed. Each damage ultimate's power is counteracted upon execution by leaving the executing hero vulnerable or the attack easily dodgeable. In every case, a well-trained player will have at least some opportunity, unless caught completely unawares, to counter this ultimate. Genji and Winston are unable to use range attacks, Junkrat's Riptire can be shot down in transit, McCree moves extremely slowly while aiming, and has to aim for a moment before firing, and so on. In contrast to damaging ultimates, Reinhardt, Zarya, and Mei have abilities that completely stop enemies in their tracks. The execution of each of these abilities is subtly different, but their main function is to slow enemy progress and make them instantly vulnerable to incoming attack. Zarya's Graviton Surge, particularly, can be extremely deadly when paired together with one of the above abilities, or another large group damage ability like Junkrat's Riptire ultimate. Movement hampering ultimates are usually fairly easily dodged, or certain characters have a mode of quick escape. The abilities have less direct bearing on combat efficacy of the executor's team, so counters are more plentiful, generally speaking. The remaining ultimates are slightly more difficult to classify as all belonging to one group, but I'm going to lump them all together as a single utility group. Each of these abilities, instead of contributing directly in an offensive manner, instead supplements the team. Widowmaker's Infrasight serves to give the entire team a wall hack ability, where they're able to locate any enemy via their silhouette anywhere on the map. Symmetra creates a teleporter exit, the entrance of which is automatically placed at the team's spawn point, which allows the team to rapidly return to combat after death, while Mercy forgoes the return portion altogether by instantly reviving all teammates within a radius, if only once. In the case of utility ultimates, there are fewer immediately obvious counters, though the abilities typically also make the executor vulnerable, or in the case of Symmetra's teleporter, the opposing team is notified of the teleporter immediately and can track it down and destroy it before its lifetime expires. As such, no individual ultimate is without its weakness, not instantly making it a win button, but with well-executed teamwork, the ultimate can be particularly useful and can often lead to a team kill, which is to say an entire team being defeated simultaneously, or can prolong a battle significantly. The ultimates in Overwatch are one of the defining characteristics of the game. As such, the ultimate gauge is one of the most prominent UI features, always displayed front and center in the player's field of view, where it's easily checked. When the ultimate is fully charged, the gauge flashes brightly to draw the player's attention, a specific sound effect is played, and the entire icon that replaces the gauge on the heads-up display glows a bright blue with an aura of special effects to ensure that the player is never unaware of the fact that they have access to an ultimate ability. The ultimates are visually distinct, immediately drawing attention to any point of immediate concern in the form of on-screen prompts or large special effects. This in part helps to facilitate the opposing player's counters to the ultimates being executed at any time. Each ultimate is also paired with two distinct audio cues, which are also broadcast to all players on the field, depending on which team they're on. Although it's not explicitly stated as part of the game's tutorial process, the player will quickly become acquainted with the individual cues and be able to identify which belong to their opponents and which are friendly. This distinction through audio is one of the most clever parts of the Ultimate's presentation, and a very important facet of the overall design of Overwatch, as, though each team's attack effects are color-coded, in the confusion of battle it can be difficult to discern whether an attack is a threat or not. The audio associated with each ultimate relays a large amount of information to the player, what's being done, where it's happening, and whether it's a threat to the player or not. This audio cue additionally allows the players on the team of the ability being executed to further add value to the ultimate being triggered. Hearing Zarya's fire at will prompts the team to look for the source of the graviton pulse and unload on the helpless enemies trapped in its gravitational field, while a responsible Reinhardt will hear D.Va's "nerf this" and rush to put his barrier field between the explosion and his team, or even use his rush to push the imminently exploding mecha away to a safer location. The ultimates are balanced within the game through three individual factors: charge time, counter ability, and investment. Charge time is the most significant factor in the balance of ultimate usage. Assuming a player is extremely adept with a character and is in constant engagement with the enemy, an ultimate can be charged through roughly 15 to 30 seconds of combat. Charge speed is in direct proportion to the amount of damage done, so highest charge potential is typically in the hands of the snipers like Widowmaker, who with roughly 6 headshots can charge an ultimate in 15 seconds. Some rough math shows that an ultimate is worth somewhere in the range of 1,650 damage, as Widowmaker's fully charged headshot does 300 damage to Hanzo's 250, pushing the gauge up by about 18% and 16% respectively. I'm still zeroing in on the exact number, but it's a good place to start. With the varied rate of passive ultimate generation, the rate that ultimates become available is tuned reasonably closely, but it does favor the high damage dealers. As mentioned above, each attack can be countered if the opposing team is ready to deal with incoming ultimates. By listening for the provided audio cues particularly, it's not out of the question for a team to at the very least cut the impact of a hostile ultimate by a small margin. Investment refers to the fact that the player who controls the character charging their ultimate, if they wish to make use of an ultimate, must remain locked into that character while it charges. Changing characters mid-game, which is also a central mechanic of Overwatch, causes the ultimate gauge to revert to 0, and the player has to start all over again. If they're close to completing their ultimate when they die and the team is in need of a role or a counter that they don't already have access to, the player is put in the situation of having to decide between whether they should finish their ultimate or to switch to a much needed new character. The model of the class-based shooter has dealt with ultimates before. The medic in Team Fortress 2 has a slow-charging ultimate ability that temporarily grants invincibility or guaranteed critical hits to the target of his healing beam. But Overwatch has taken this concept and made it a central mechanic of the game, balancing a large portion of their gameplay around the assumption that there will be a tug-of-war involving the use and countering of these ultimate abilities. With 12 players in the game, each gaining access to their ultimates often within each minute of the 15 minutes of gameplay, downtime while characters are forced to run back to a point notwithstanding, that means that the ultimates will be in constant use, the player's one trump card up their sleeve at any given point in time. The vast majority of the ultimates are specifically designed to cost mass damage at 13 of the available 21 heroes' ultimates. The abilities are weighed heavily in favor of increasing DPS over survivability and other utility, but this is reflected in the gameplay, which encourages, with good reason, constant conflict in controlled spaces. The remainder of the abilities also generally focus on dealing with groups in focused areas in such a way as to facilitate damage to large groups or otherwise assisting one's team in a small space. Of all the abilities, only Widowmaker's Infrasight and Symmetra's Teleporter serve a utility that isn't directly related to doing, mitigating, or recovering from damage. Though even an argument could be made that Symmetra's Teleporter is a method of quick recovery, and Widowmaker's facilitates attacking, though tangentially. There's certainly an additional utility within the individual ability sets of the characters, but as far as the high-cost, high-reward ultimates are concerned, each one of them supports and furthers the central game pillar of constant combat, focused on large group skirmishes and close-controlled quarters. Wrapping up, I'd like to give a final thought about the ultimates of Overwatch. As a designer, I'm a big fan of the way that they've worked at ensuring that each ability is unique in its function and supports the general gameplay style of the character individually. The ultimates are certainly skewed toward pure damage output, but even in that lack of variety, there's still a goodly amount of methods of damage delivery that are explored. I find that the introduction of ultimates creates an extra layer of both complexity and difficulty to the game that do a good job of supporting the lopsided and purposeful unbalance of the game, and they're also a great tool at putting a game back on track, assuming some modicum of teamwork can be restored. I hope that you found this video informative, if not interesting, and that perhaps through this very light analytical look at the ultimate abilities of Overwatch, that you've found something even more useful to add to your arsenal when playing. This is just the first video in a hopefully regular segment on ThursDev. If there's a game mechanic that you'd like to see me break down and analyze, let me know in the comments below. But for now, thank you, as always, for overwatching, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care.